Oh, hello. Greetings, Reclaimers. And welcome to the Halo edition of Creatives Flow with a VO. As always, I hope I continue to spark your creativity. Still a genius.
Ah, yes, that iconic voice. The voice that I was one of the luckiest guys on the ring to have voiced. That is the Monitor 343 Guilty Spark, or the Oracle, whatever you want to call him. And yes, I am his voice. Welcome to the Nerdizzle episode of Creatives Flow with a VO. Well, you'll also definitely know the name of the man who's joining us today as our co-host. He's been a guiding hand in all things Halo, almost since the game's inception. And I know you can't see me right now, but I'm bowing in an I'm not worthy prostrated position as we welcome today one of the masterminds behind the Halo franchise, Mr. Frank O'Connor. Welcome to this silly little podcast I've started, sir. I got to tell you, people are really loving this, and I'm happy to hear that because I've been doing this so long, and I'm like, good God, where do they come up with this stuff? I'm in the booth seeing that there's this crazy stretch of words and this incredible idea that's going to be a commercial, a video game, a whatever, and I'm like, where the hell do they get these ideas? And it came to me in a mountain bike ride. They were like, hey, dumbass, make your own. So here we are.
Yeah. I mean, I can tell you why they never do it is because sometimes there's people like me, and they're idiots. And this time I can say, yes, it is genius because it's certainly in Infinite, most of your writing was done by geniuses and not me. So I'm not worried about that part of it. And I do wonder about that because I think that when you're writing a character, I doubt there's anyone who writes either screenplays or VO dialogue or even combat dialogue, that kind of stuff, that isn't thinking about a specific actor. And sometimes it's you or it's Steve Downes or it's Jen Taylor. But sometimes, when you're writing a new character or when you're voicing a new character, you're thinking about, it's either an archetype or an even more specific read than that. And speaking personally, I write like that as well. It's not just a case of sort of thinking about a character. Oh, this character is going to be like James Earl Jones and he'll be the voice of God and all that sort of stuff. It's like this character is going to be like this actor, and frequently enough like this actor doing this part. And everyone does it. I don't think it's lazy. It's like you have to make shortcuts in your head to get to how you think the character needs to sound. But you're also well aware that and this is probably a hard part for the audience to just feel an instinct about, which is, that the actor that you do get, right, regardless of whether you get James Earl Jones or you go back to work with an actor that you already know, that actor is going to bring something completely different to it than what you put in the copy in the final draft document. And that's at least for me, that's an area of comfort because that when you're writing, that the actor is typically going to be good enough to make it better when they get there. So there's a lot of sort of inconsistencies and quality bar issues as you're pumping out a script that are going to get solved by your partner in the booth, who's the actor typically, and that they'll elevate mediocre content. So
right, and our job is to do just that, to bring what you heard in us in the first place to life, right. to breathe the breath of life into the character, or in my case, give the O's and ones to Guilty Spark, right? But to breathe the breath of life into the character, whether it's a 60-second commercial or a video game or an animated character, you heard something in us that said he's the essence or she's the essence of the character,
right?
And our job is, like you said, to even plus that.
I will say this is maybe just me, but there is something satisfying when you have a really weirdly specific take on a bit of dialogue, where you want the emphasis on some idea or some emotion that's in the piece of dialogue, and the actor does it the way you imagined it. Right now, it's not always on the first take, but there's something really satisfying when that happens, because then you think, oh, the semantic instructions inherent in this bit of dialogue, they were they were there and they were parsed, and that was the way the actor felt it needed to be read as well. And you've been through this long enough, and maybe you can share some horror stories about you're in that booth and you have a director, sometimes not the original writer, basically making you read it the exact way they just read it to you, as an example, which is fine because sometimes you need to do that, and that's what the client wants or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
But you must have been through some horror stories where you're being directed from the booth to just repeat it verbatim the way that the director is telling you to.
Yes, it's called parroting. It's not really a horror story. For me, I take it personally that I'm just not getting what's in your head. So I will say, you know what? Let me parrot you.
Mm-hmm.
You give me the line in the feel, in the timbre, and in the pacing that you want, and I will parrot it. And sometimes if I do it well enough, they hear that and say, well, gosh, that's not what I want at all. Go back to doing it your way. Then some muse comes through the door, or I open a door in my mind or into my spirit, and the muse says, try this. And I say, okay, we got this. So now let's try something else. Something else just came to me. Let's try this. And it's always a 50-50 crapshoot that you're like, that's it. That's how I got Guilty Spark, man. I almost left the room. And, you know, they were like, boy, you've got the timbre, you got, and I said, what is Guilty Spark? What can you show me what he is? What's his essence? And so Marty and Joe and Matt Searle and I came together in the booth because I've known Marty for so long. And I said, well, let me try this. And he said, Tim, he's like a maniacal C-3PO. I don't want C-3PO, but he's kind of like a maniacal C-3PO. So then I came in and did him again, and they go, that's it. That's the guy.
Yeah.
So, it was one of those cases where you have to get out of your own way and get out of your ego. You and the creative find the character together.
Right. And, Joseph, I think most of the people listening to your podcast will know, is back at Halo at 343, working on the next content that we have to deliver. Marty, everyone knows, of course. Matt Soul was he worked at Bungie before I started. Actually, I started on Halo 2, and Matt Soul had departed a few months before then. And he was, when I arrived, felt like that was a big gap and big shoes, not necessarily for me to fill, but just for the studio to fill when he'd gone on to do something new. He was one of the folks who worked on some of the early, obviously the narrative content, but also just the sort of fictional universe. There's a bunch of people involved in that, from internal staff, Rob McLeese, Marty, Joseph, external novelists like Eric Nyland, and Matt Soul was one of those folks that planted a lot of the seeds that are in there. But when you were doing Guilty Spark, it was the olden days, right?
Sure. They were still in Chicago. When Steve and I and Stacker booked it, it was all still in Chicago.
Yeah.
And that's how Marty got involved too. Right. I mean, it goes back as far as Marty and Mike were still in their original space. It hadn't burned to the ground yet. Right. God bless. Marty and Mike were still in their original space. And he said, hey, Timmy, you got to come over here. He goes, we want to show you some stuff. We just came from this thing called E3. And he goes, we think we're going to start doing sound and music for video games. We've hooked up with this little company here in Chicago called Bungie. And we just wanted to show you some stuff. And he started playing some of the music and some of the sound effects. And I'm like, this is really cool. Yeah, sure. Let me know if that turns into anything.
Yeah.
And the next thing I know is, we're working on Septerra Core.
Right.
Then Oni. And then finally Halo, and Halo, they just called Stacker, me, and, Steve wasn't involved in any of the other prior stuff, but they called Stacker and me back. And, we were instantly thought of because we knew these guys. Right. Which was great.
Yeah.
And that's how it all came to be.
And the technology back then, and just the budget and the sort of production values were all, it was much more guerrilla, right? It was much more, I mean, a sound booth is a sound booth. I mean, like you probably recognize a brand new state of the art sound booth in Chicago in 1999 as well. But the actual production value and quality that goes into these, not just bit rates and all that stuff is important, but it's much more like filmmaking now than I think it used to be.
Oh
And obviously,
yeah.
video games are more like animation, but there's more and more full sort of but not just facial and mocap and stuff, but full performance capture with multiple people on sets and in studios properly acting. So it's been interesting to see, from our perspective, how much more work is involved in adjusting to those production values. But how is it from your side?
The difference for us is the rooms really in and of themselves haven't changed that much where we record. Soundproofing is soundproofing, and deadening and all that stuff.
Right.
And mics are, for the most part, haven't changed much. What has changed is how incredibly crisp and clear and right on the tip of your nose digital recording has made everything. Now our job as a really good actor or a really good voice actor is to work the mic to make something happen where you're off mic just a little bit and walking into a room and then, hey, I'm right in your face. I mean, that stuff really hasn't changed. But what made it better was the audio technology that we have today. And a great recording engineer and a great editor.
Yeah.
So, I mean, those are really the only things that have changed, physically changed, but minuscule. It's all just minuscule.
We do a lot of work with transmedia stuff and the TV show and all that stuff. I think it's fun having conversations with their audio engineers and their recording guys about how different the sort of deliverables are once they get to us, right? Once we've got the booth session and everything that we need, the technology doesn't stop there, because then it goes in in a modern game in Infinite, it then goes in a on the fly real-time Atmos, sound processing element of the engine, so that we'll record lines from folks like you for background that we know are just going to be thrown around in the Atmos mix for placement and you were talking about being front and center on the mic just now, and that sort of put me in mind of some of the stuff that Guilty Spark says in Halo CE especially isn't supposed to be front and center, and in fact is deliberately sort of knocked back a little bit, because he's supposed to be crazy running out ahead of you and sort of rambling in a sense. So you have to sort of balance that between what is the important information that Guilty Spark is going to relay to me as a player so that I know what to do, where to go, or that something he just said to me is much more important than something else. And some of that is done in the game and in the engine and in the mix, but a lot of it is done by you right there in the booth. And I'm wondering how that, if at all, has changed when you're sort of asking your director, okay, what is happening here? Is this going to be in a cinematic? Right. Is this going to be gameplay?
If it's not written out, as you know, sometimes you guys write out what's happening in what we call the Halo copy, if you will, the box to the left. Okay, now he's running through a room. He's happy. He's sad. He's pissed off. He's going to blow you up. So now those give me a clue as to where am I going to be on the mic. If it's like when Spark is way ahead of you and floating and he's off the mic, come this way. I might be way off mic. Or just slightly off, just enough so that it picks up room too.
Yeah.
You want to naturally pick up some of the room.
Yeah.
Although most of my room is pretty dead, and this is I had a soundproof room built in my house. Right. You still want some of the live of the room to pick it up so they don't have to completely do it digitally. Although a really good engineer can say, yeah, no, just stay on mic. I'll do that all later.
Right.
And they add the room. They add the sound. They add the effect that you're, 10 feet, 20 feet in front of you and floating in the air.
Yeah.
So, yeah, a lot of that, I might get off access just a little bit to sound like I'm not right on the mic, which is, as Spark can turn and look you right in the face, that's when I'm a little more on mic, especially if I'm, being in his maniacal mode, where he's getting angry at Sergeant Johnson, say,
Yeah. And you're right. They can fix some of it in post, as they like to say. But again, that's one of the differences with a game engine versus a linear recording, which is that you in the game you can not just shift the position and the volume and the sort of timbre and stuff like that. You can make it sound like it's upstairs in a wooden hallway to the right, because that's important information for the game. Okay, there's a bad guy up there. So it's less of a sort of fix it and post thing and more just a fundamental difference in the medium. And you've worked on tons of games, including ours, obviously. But I'm wondering how they compare to both other animated projects and live action stuff, as it were, where your voice is going to be either over or above video of some kind. And I'm wondering what the difference is in terms of your process. And
Usually room size, mic choice,
Yep.
and of course the engineer knows the project and usually knows the project well. I don't know if you guys are still working with Formosa, or you guys just go from studio to studio when you're in Los Angeles, but a lot of them will put the mic way away from you and control everything. Some of them have the mic right here. This is usually the mic that's sitting in front of me right now is the mic that they use most often. Every once in a while for animation, they want something that's a bit more warm, so they'll use something with a tube, or they'll use something that's a little more round, where a Sennheiser mic will, is very direct and it'll rip your head right off. So yeah, I mean, the difference is a lot of that has to do with who the audio engineer is, how well he knows the project, and what the end result will be.
Yeah.
Now, did you guys have to do with Halo, especially the newer ones? Are you doing a lot of mocap or no?
Yeah,
You are.
we've done more and more. Most of it is used, right? So we'll and maybe this is a timely example. If Jen Taylor comes in to do Cortana stuff, because it's important that her hologram is in the room. We'll do mocap for the game where that hologram is, it's standing roughly where it is. But the purpose is to get real performances from the actors who are really just going to be translated directly into their mocap CG. Guilty Spark is a little bit different because he doesn't actually have a face, right? So
Right.
you
Right.
still get some value and benefit from being in the room because then you're performing with other actors right there in the space. But it is a little bit different because his design is designed to feel alienating, right?
Mm-hmm.
Designed to feel somewhat sort of distant and aloof. But yeah, we try to do mocap and facial cap for as much as possible because you just end up with better material at the other
Sure.
end. And it was funny to see Jen on the set of the TV show being one of the most experienced mocap actors that they'd worked with because she's done it, so many times for Halo and other games.
That's crazy. Yeah, I guess I should know that because she does so many video games.
Right. She's Princess
I mean,
Peach, I think, as well, right? In Mario. I don't know if they mocap it, but I can see her
They
driving
may.
around in a go-kart and yelling at people.
They may. Maybe facially.
Depending on the game or the animation project, they will record you and then animate to that performance. Or you know this, you're sometimes voicing to a pre-canned animation that's already done. But Disney was doing, the actors first, and that's kind of what you get out of that process. With the Leisure Suit Larry example is a perfect example of that, where the animators are looking at the actor to get the emotional range and the physical characteristics and the whole performance. So that's got to be fun for
Sure.
you as an actor, presumably.
And the game that I got to really let go the most was one of Matt Sell's games was Disney's Guilty Party. And that was, I think I played 6 characters on that game. And that was quite a bit of work. And again, they filmed us.
How do you do that, jumping from one character to another?
Usually they get all of one character in the can.
Right.
You audition for all the parts, and the great for me, there's nothing better than have them slide a piece of paper or put up on the screen their stature is, the shape of their face. Do they have jowls? I mean, all that kind of stuff. If you can see the character, you kind of shape your body to become that.
Right.
Like, for Smoot, he was a tall, lanky, supposed to be a guy from, like, the South, and he was kind of a skee-ball himself.
And he was dirty and
Sleazy.
and then, yeah, he was sleazy. And then the one of the stars of the game was the Admiral, or the what was his name? The Commodore. The
There we
Commodore.
go.
And I definitely gave him a very pompous voice. Yes.
Yeah.
So and it's funny because we went all over the place for that. I played a little kid, and I don't know. sometimes they'd come out with a voice and they're like, oh, that's so him.
Right.
And Donna J. Folks was on the game, and oh my, that's so her. And it was great because everybody who got their part got it because their voice just matched what they had for the game,
Right.
like any good production, really.
Right. And
so now, did you come to the States to work for Bungie?
no, I actually came to the States to work for a video game magazine before I started at Bungie, and that's how I ended up hooked up with Bungie. I was working at that time. I moved to LA during the OJ trial. I don't remember what year, maybe 96, 97. It was during the trial. It was after the Bronco chase, and it was during the trial. I'd never heard of OJ. People in America don't believe me. Like, I knew sort of vaguely he was in The Naked Gun, right? Like,
right.
And but I had no idea. I knew he was a sports guy. No idea what was going on. But that was my big sort of immersion in American culture. So I got everything. I got race, politics, car chases. It was, it's an exciting time. But then I was working for the official Xbox magazine. And I was writing stuff about Halo. I'd met with Pete Parsons and a bunch of the other guys being at some of the events, and it had just started up a friendly relationship with them. And I was just focused on writing about games, not writing in them or working on them. And I hadn't really considered it. Certainly not Microsoft. It was in Seattle. It was raining up there. It was cold, apparently. I was from Scotland originally, so I knew from cold and wet. Like, the Seattle winter is like Scottish summer, to be honest. So I thought, I'm palm trees and sunshine. I don't need any of that. But Halo just blew my mind just as a game, and it was I played video games. Obviously, that my job involved it, but I'd played video games since I was a little kid. Pong systems at friends' houses.
Sure, man.
I had friends who were wealthier than I was, so they had like Atari and that ColecoVision and stuff like that. So I was playing in arcades. My dream game, and I'd never really sort of sat down and codified it as a designer, an idea, or a plan. It was just like, it was big and you could go do whatever you wanted and explore a world. And then Halo delivered on that, and it delivered on a console. There were plenty of PC games that touched on elements of that ability to just explore in a big 3D space at high fidelity. But there's something about console where you just sit down, one thing in your hand, and it removes another layer of obfuscation from that exploration.
Sure.
Like, if you're sitting at a desk with a mouse and a keyboard, like, that can be fun and you can lose yourself and be immersed in it. But if you're sitting in front of a big screen with a controller, just sort of vanishes into your hand, right? It's just gone.
Mm-hmm.
It's just an extension of your manipulating.
Right. Once you get it down, you're right. You don't even think about it anymore.
So Halo finally delivered on that, and a bunch of other stuff as well. Just the ability to navigate through 3D with sticks, like that just didn't.
Mm-hmm.
That hadn't been done really well before. GoldenEye did it, but it was like an Easter egg kind of hacky thing. But they just nailed it, and it was so meaningful and impressionable to me. Even at that time, I was really sort of cynical and hackneyed and bored of I've seen everything now. Like, I'm in my 20s. I've seen every game there is. But Halo just, it was mind blowing at the time. I think
sure.
There were loads of games
for all of us, really.
Yeah, and
for all of us,
and the whole thing, the music, the writing, the dialogue, the characterization, like, it was a real story, but it was also your story as a player, and you never felt like, for as iconic as Steve Downes is, he's not constantly interrupting you to break up your immersion in the story, right? He says that's one of the reasons he's so laconic and sort of brief in how he speaks. And you just got to be in that story, in Steve's armor, as it were.
Yeah. Well, and I love his answer to what everybody says. Why do you never see Master Chief's face? And Steve's answer is just brilliant, and that is because when you look at your reflection in his visor, you see yourself.
Yeah, and we've echoed that sentiment of Steve's for so many years, and it came up with the TV show. Why do you show the Master Chief's face in the TV show? And the simple answer is you said it in your question. It's a TV show, and a video game is your adventure. It's your experience.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally your perspective. and they serve different functions, really radically different
Right,
functions.
right. In the TV show, we have to unfold the story for you.
And it's
you know?
about Chief as well. Like it's not
Mhm.
it's not about you. It's about the characters that are right there in front of you on the screen. And yeah.
So to jump to that, I mean, how involved are you guys to writing the scripts? Are you guys writing the scripts or?
No. We work with the showrunners and the writers very directly to a daily basis, basically, going over initial plotting ideas, and then everything from writing to dialogue to.
Okay.
One of my main responsibilities is to make sure that it exists in a different timeline and a different canon. It's a branch of the canon, but one of my jobs is to make sure that we are being consistent where we do want to adhere to things that are familiar to people with the game and universe canon, and where we deviate for the same reason, like the TV show has to do different things. The TV show can't, this is a weird one, TV show can't rely on coincidence in the way that a game can. So if you think about the spoilers for the TV show here a little bit, I'll try to be careful. But if you think about the game, everything happens to you, right? Like you happen to come across the Halo. That's not a spoiler for the game, right? Everyone, you happen to come across the Halo, but when you sort of backtrack through the lore and the canon, it's very unlikely that everything is just happening to you and not to anyone else, right? So that's one of the fundamental differences in the medium. So in writing the show, we're eliminating coincidence where it was getting silly, but still trying to stick to the principles that were in the same ideas in the game. And I think, there will always be a tension between those two things, but I think we actually, one of my jobs, or one of the things that I feel is my responsibility, is to try and pull it back towards the principles and the ideals of the game, so that the chief in the show is that hero. And you'll see him go through things that are more complicated, emotionally and politically than you do in a video game for obvious reasons. But he is that guy. Like he is the hero, and he's going to end up in all the same places that the chief that we know from the games does. And but that was back to your original question. One of the reasons why when Bungie offered me a job, I sort of jumped at it, is because I knew they were doing something genuinely amazing, and I had so many ideas and sort of dreams of being involved in it. But that was the first time that I'd really seriously considered a job in gaming.
Huge jump too. I mean, job wise. I mean, working for a magazine to working for Bungie themselves.
There was a lot of similarity, like writing combat dialogue and writing, preview after preview or news story. It's not fundamentally different. It's just becoming monomaniacal and focusing on one subject. That's one of the things about your job that I'm just professionally jealous of, the amount of variety that you get to go through, right? Like what's your spectrum? I mean, you've already talked about Leisure Suit Larry and Guilty Spark, but what's the kind of extremes of character that you've voiced?
I'm really one of the lucky ones that can say I've voiced thousands of projects. Some of them are quite iconic. I mean, the kids who grew up watching cartoons know a lot of the characters. Being in Chicago, we're very much a package town. We didn't get a real lot of chances to do anything other than video games narrations for corporations, and of course, tons and tons of commercials. So when they're watching cartoons and we're sitting there and one of my commercials pops up where I'm the voice of Apple for Apple Jacks, or a Keebler Elf or something like that, or one of the Kellogg's commercial, or a McDonald's Land character, kids were blown away. No shit, you were that character? So it's almost as iconic as some of the stuff you do for video games. None of them will ever bring you as much fame and fortune as, being in a video game or in a really cool cartoon. But, I often joke that between Kellogg's, Keebler, and McDonald's, between S.C. Johnson, Kellogg's, Keebler, and McDonald's, they bought my house. I was a series regular, if you will. So that's kind of fun.
Yeah. And did you ever do any work with the sort of Chicago video game pinball empire, the sort of Midway, Bally,
still do
Stern?
Once in a while. As a matter of fact, I just did some other stuff for them, for Williams Gaming. Yeah. Oh yeah, Bally.
one of my one of the dreams I got to live as part of this, and it was Chicago related, is meeting Eugene Jarvis, the guy who created Defender and Stargate and Robotron.
Wow.
And
Defender.
yeah, and
Yeah,
this was
I remember that.
pretty recently, like 3 years ago. He blew my mind by, we've all played video games for 40, nearly 50 years now, right? Like from Pong till now. A
Sure.
thing I never thought about until he brought it up at dinner. He's like, yeah, that's why, uh, the Halo was weird because it was the first game to get rid of, and obviously it wasn't literally the first, but from Eugene's POV, the first big game to get rid of the idea of lives in your video game, because you sort of stay alive forever if you're just careful about it.
Mm-hmm.
He had grown up in the world of 3 lives and you're out, right? Or you put in quarters to continue. And he
Mm-hmm.
pointed out that, and that was just the pinball economics. And I said, what? And he said, yeah, that's why you get 3 lives, is because we'd already proven the exact cadence of how many quarters we'll get with 3 pinball balls. So
Yeah,
you
right,
last long
exactly.
enough, you make the game hard enough so that you lose in a cadence that's profitable to the company until you're great, and at which point you bypass that, which is true of video games as well. And it was so obvious when he said it, but just hearing it straight from the horse's mouth, because he was working for the pinball company, right?
Oh,
And it just hadn't occurred
the
to him.
whole idea is to keep making quarters go in
Exactly.
the machine.
Yeah, and it was like I knew that's why you had 3 lives, but I did not put pinball and video games together like that
Oh,
until he said it.
absolutely.
Yeah,
It was- we all live there, man.
right.
There was a pinball game place right up the street from us, and we lived in that place when it opened up. So we could play Pac-Man and Gorgar, and I mean those were our favorite. We all have our favorites.
Right.
There's no doubt about it.
And
You
pinball
know,
had way more VO. Like, so for you as a kid,
sure.
pinball probably had as much influence as video games, if not, certainly
Well,
in terms
and
of what you did, pinball was way ahead of video games.
well, what we really started doing more of is slot machine stuff
Right.
for Bally. I mean, because that was where we and they were paying us unions. They made a union scale just for Bally and Midway games. And Bally Williams, I think, I forget who's together. I remember it was Bally, but it was insane how many voice work things we'd have to do. Oh, that was lovely. Now, why don't you try rolling for 3?
Right.
Doing stuff like that. And you do one voice after the next.
Yeah. And
Kind of like a video game.
and that's still happening. And, if you go to Vegas, and a lot more licensing nowadays. So you're going
Oh
to get
yeah,
a lot of
oh yeah,
licensed characters. And
yeah. The Monopoly game, I was on that. There was a lot of stuff.
yeah, pachinko in Japan everything is licensed. I doubt you'll be doing too many Japanese language voiceovers.
Yeah, I know China's doing a lot. So I do a lot of toys too, man. VTech Toys and I go way back.
Right.
So is the creative process within 343 pretty democratic? What's the brainstorming sessions like?
It was,
I know it's a kind of a broad question, but is it? I mean, do you guys just sit together in a group, or does one person come in and say, "Hey, I had this really great idea. What do you guys think?"
it's tied to what we were talking about earlier, where you had Marty and Joseph and Matt Soul in the booth telling you, where something was going narratively. It used to be like that. And, folks like Jason Jones, who's, he's a
Sure.
engineer, coder, and the boss, he was having tons of input on script back in the day. But the process has become so much more professional, is the wrong word, that because that implies quality that it shouldn't. What it means is game narrative is now a kind of codified, recognized profession with a bunch of systems, so that if you're working on a game story at whatever, Take-Two, Rockstar, and you move to Xbox or PlayStation, you're going to be using a lot of the same tools and processes and working habits. So it's just gotten much more, it's scaled up, obviously, and become much more of a profession. And it certainly aligns much more to sort of TV and movie production now than it used to. And part of that is just scale. But at least at the kickoff of a game, it is still pretty democratic, and you still get voices from all the disciplines. Because a game is, with a movie, and there are examples of this. They're still rare, but you can do it. You can write the perfect script and someone can come along, sometimes it's the same guy, and make that script into the perfect movie that's exactly what was in the script, right? And
Mm-hmm.
you can skip between pausing the video and looking at the script and saying that is exactly what's on the page. I think with a video game that is harder and harder because there's so many invisible, emergent, outcomes of design and other sort of vagaries of making a video game, where a
Mm-hmm.
little tweak to the jump height on Donkey Kong can completely change the pace of the game, right? And that's
Yeah.
not true, or doesn't have to be true in a show or a movie. It can be. But I think that you have to make an excellent plan, and you have to commit to it as well as you can. But you can, in a video game, you can arrive at a scene where we our boats don't work. Water isn't fun to play on. So we're going to make this, instead of being on the water anymore, it's going to be on lava, or
Right.
a collapsing mountain or something like that. A movie properly planned and executed won't run into those kinds of things. Like, it may run into budget things or an actor's out of commission or something like that. But I
Mm-hmm.
think a video game ends up being much more than the sum of its parts, in a way that a movie usually isn't, if it's done properly. But almost all video games invent or evolve things on the fly, just as a
You bet.
natural part. And gameplay traditions change. Halo 2 had to introduce matchmaking to play multiplayer online, which didn't, for the
Right.
Xbox, didn't
Right.
exist before that. And so it had to invent a bunch of things that hadn't been invented before for consoles. When you played multiplayer on Quake or a PC game, you would pick a server that had a set of rules that you liked and just go there, right? And it was frustrating because you couldn't get in because it was full. There's 12 people in here, you can't get in. You just got to wait until someone leaves.
Right.
And the Max and the guys on the Halo 2 multiplayer team had to invent ways to get around that. That process of invention was, again, one of the things that made Halo really stand out, and other video games too, where they're like,
Well,
we've
sure.
run into a
Sure.
problem, we have to invent our way around that. Movies have done that, but it tends to be big jumps. So you've got black and white, talkies, color, 3D, and then even things like Citizen Kane, where they introduce like really different ways of approaching the imagery and the action.
And
Yeah,
storyline. I mean,
yeah,
storylines have changed vastly
yeah,
from those times. And the thing about what you're talking about is you can reshoot a scene if it's not working. With you guys, it's got to be coded to make it actually work.
right.
Hey, this is not working, or we've got a glitch here, or and it's often, it's not a band-aid. It's something you guys have to truly come together and invent
Right.
to make it happen, make it work, make the story flow. I'm sure there's been times when you're like, yeah, that scene's just not working, man. Let's just get rid of it. Or that's really brilliant. Let's elaborate on that. And the thing is again, so it's got to be completely invented from zero.
Right.
The thing that freaked me out the most, the first time I played a really cool video game, which for me was Oni, and I was playing on a computer, was how the hell does that thing see me way down here and
Right.
start shooting at me?
Yeah.
That was the thing that got me. Somebody had to say, okay, I can see you peeking around the corner. I'm going to shoot at you. And I'm like, what the hell? How does that happen? And the sneaking and stuff, because, you play a lot of games now, and it's you don't even think about all the thought that had to go into the creative thought, to get back to what this podcast is about, all the creativity that had to come into being able to sneak, to grab, to throw, all the weaponry, the creatures, creations themselves, such as the elite and the grunts, and all the storyline that had to come into play just to make Halo what it is.
Yeah. And the Oni is it's an older Bungie game. Take-Two owns the IP now. I think it was part of the sort of before Bungie was acquired by Microsoft. And it was a third-person action game, like fast-paced Tomb Raider with anime graphics. Really cool,
Mm-hmm.
sort of manga and anime influenced design. Lorraine McLeese did a lot of the character designs. The and it was to your point, like there's tools you can turn on in video games, not necessarily specifically only, where you can actually see all the things that blew your mind. Like you can see the wireframe of the villain with a laser green line pointing to what he can see. And you could see,
Right.
I see that now. That's his line of sight. But you also brought up a really compelling problem with video games, especially again first person, is there's another director in there. It's not just us, right? There's the player. And so if you're playing through the library in Halo CE and 343 Guilty Spark is trying to, and spoiler, he is trying to lead you to the right place that you need to go to. And he's also, gently giving you a little bit more information that isn't necessarily plot essential, but it will help color the next cinematic so that when Guilty Spark makes a big revelation, you were kind of suspicious of him already. But that player is a director. He's got the camera. He can go wherever they want. They can run away from Guilty Spark and what he's saying to them. So you're always like fighting the tension between player intent and authorial intent. And again, it's its own medium with its own problems, but also its
Sure.
own. It has tons of advantages over movies and other linear media, just in terms of you can do a lot more filler with a video game than you can with a TV show, right? Like people would get pretty bored if a battle sequence went on for 2 hours. But in
Which is why
yeah,
they're doing so
but in a
well.
video game,
That's why
it's
video games are
challenging. Yeah.
doing so well.
So,
You create the story as you go. And not a lot of games do that, but I've seen it where if you make a choice to do something one time, play through the game again and get to that same scene and choose the other thing, there's a different outcome.
Yeah.
So that's a whole other scene and a whole other thing that has to happen. So
and there's tons of there's subgenres in even the sort of YouTube world and the Twitch world where players will they'll play through on Halo, they'll play through on Legendary, and set themselves some chore like I won't use any bullets, or I'll do this whole thing stealth mode. But the one that always blows my mind is speed runs, where people will complete a game as fast as humanly possible by any means necessary. There was a recent Elden Ring is a big game, a huge game right now, sort of Dark Souls style. George R. R. Martin worked on some of the story, and I think the game can,
Okay.
it's a video game, so it can take like 14 hours to complete, like if you're doing pretty well, blah blah blah. And I think the speedrun record on it ended up being something like 9 minutes, and it was there was a lot of exploitation of bugs and code and so on, but it's still pretty amazing.
That is amazing. It's bloody amazing. I got to tell you. To watch these kids play these games when I've seen them play, in multiplayer mode, it just blows my mind what they were able to get away with. I mean, knowing exactly when to move, when to jump, when to melee, all that stuff. It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Did you unplug yourself?
I'm running
No,
out of
you're good.
power, but I don't know why, because I'm plugged in.
Oh, okay.
I'm just plugging
So
in
now,
extra power ports. Got a lot.
don't run out of power, man. You're a gamer. You should know better than to run out of power.
USB-C cords here.
Do you find that there's moments for your creative inspirations? Are they always at work? Do you set aside time to create? Is it when you're out taking a walk or doing stuff that you find your best ideas come to you?
It's probably like most people. It's either you get just a moment of inspiration that you weren't expecting, or sometimes I'm lucky and it's while I'm working on the problem, right? Like that's the best time is okay, I've got a problem, I need to solve it, and you can just get a flash of inspiration. But I'm typically inspired by ideas from outside, things like I'm reading a book and I'm like, what, that is a great way to deal with this problem, and it may not even be similar, but it's that sort of general sort of inspiration by proximity, I think I'd call it. But yeah, I sometimes think of things in dreams. I sometimes just have an idea while I'm riding my bike.
Wonderful.
But yeah.
I mean, for me, it's if I'm going at a a situation, I'm trying to find the soul of a voice. If it doesn't come to me immediately, I might lay something down as let's say, a personal, mental, and spiritual placeholder.
Right.
And then I just walk away from it. And I'll go do something completely different. I'll go outside, I'll take a ride, and then I'll come back. If I've got time, I'll come back and attack it the next day, later that day. And sometimes, again, the door of the muse opens and in walks the muse and says, here's the right soul of the voice. And I just get lucky, I only had one guy that I interviewed who said he sits down, attacks a problem until it comes.
Right.
And I've only heard that. Most people say, it's when I'm cooking that the ideas come, or it's when I'm, when I'm washing the kids, or sitting down with a glass of wine and a book, and I'm like, shit, now I got a great line for that. For voiceovers, we used to sometimes you had what was called the elevator audition. So you get an audition call, and this was back in the day when we went in the room to audition for you.
Right.
You'd get to all the creatives are staring at you. You got the script in your hand, and you didn't wait long enough for the soul of the voice to come to you. So get there, however long that takes, get there 15, 20 minutes, and sometimes it just doesn't. But you go and you read, and now you're like, oh, okay, thanks. We'll let you know if you got it or not. You get on the elevator, and on the way down, you're like, shit, I know what I want to do now. Too late.
So do you as an actor get a lot of inspiration? I'll get inspiration from books and other mediums and games, obviously, but how do you sort of take in, even if you're not being inspired to grab something from it, what inspires you in terms of media that you're watching right now? What movies and shows are blowing your mind? I'm bringing this up because the way you just described that reminded me of the show Barry that's on HBO, which is about a hitman who takes up acting, like
with Fonzie as his teacher.
And Fonzie is blowing my mind right now, because I just never known always knew he was an amazing actor, but never knew he had so much range and ability to surprise everyone in that show. But I'm wondering what you watch.
Well, he said this role has really opened up a whole new avenue for him. And to answer your question, it's really about being the right person at the right time, like Guilty Spark, okay? I mean, sometimes it's just you walk through the door, you see the character description, it comes together for you in a flash, in a lightning bolt moment, and you open your mouth, and not always, but most of the time when they know, you say, wow, that's the guy. As soon as that guy opened his mouth and started performing, that's the guy. We'll hear the other three guys in the waiting room, but this is exactly what I had in my mind. And it's usually that specific. And the hardest thing for actors to do, certainly this actor, and I know others, is to walk out of the room saying, I know I did a great performance. Why didn't I get the job? And it's not personal. It's just that you weren't exactly what they heard in their mind.
And it goes both ways. Again, just I know we're sticking to Guilty Spark, but with good reason. As when we were working with Greg Bear, the novelist, on the Halo sort of prequel trilogy that's set 100,000 years ago in Guilty Spark's
Primordium,
his contemporary era. His main reference, of course, was your performance. And so he had, I'm not going to spoil that series of books, because there's a bunch of big twists with Guilty Spark that are still kind of part of the lore and will be. But he came up with that part of that twist, both in conversation with me and some other folks, but also based on his understanding of the character from your performance, because that's really the only one, right? It's either in text or it's your performance. So it goes both ways. And we were talking about that earlier, is that you sometimes hear a specific actor in your mind as you're trying to think about what this other thing that you're trying to build is. And that's exactly what Greg Bear was doing with Guilty Spark. So it does go both ways.
Well, and I asked the producer who was on that project, and she said, let me ask Greg what he wants to do. And I said, I understand that this is Spark. Before he was Spark, he was Chakos. And I said, why don't I just read Chakos? in my own voice. And she said, well, what about the other characters? I said, you tell me, but if you want me to read as a woman, I'll read as a woman. You know, and you know, even as I did Kelly Gay's book, I read the librarian. I tried to emulate the woman you guys booked as the librarian. And she was an older British woman, so I read her as an older British woman. So, I mean, and as soon as she heard me doing all these different voices, she was like, oh my God, let's just do the book this way. So, you know, when I did Riser's voice, I did him almost like as if a grunt had full-on thoughts and sentences and stuff like that. I did Riser almost as a grunt voice. I did, what was it? Opa? I forget his name. The grandfather, Gamelpar. I did Gamelpar as an older man, you know, and that was really the gist of it. So I was Chakis and several, and then of course I never revealed that it was Spark until the very last sentence of the book. I think it was maybe the last paragraph that I became 343 Guilty Spark. And fans, I got to tell you, Frank,
by the way, we did warn you.
Frank, I got to tell you, fans were writing me like crazy and said, you freaked us the fuck out. We had no idea, you know, that was going to be, first of all, that was your normal speaking voice, because, and then they said, did you just do the end of the book? Said, no.
Reading
did the whole thing.
Audiobooks are, again, it's something that I marvel at, because you have this, you know, sometimes you get a really expensive production with multiple voices on it, but for one actor to be multiple gender, nationalities, accents, and so on, and keep it like believable and respectful is just intimidating as all get out. I've narrated my own short story, and that was brutal. I'll never do it again.
Wow.
But I listen to a lot of audiobooks now while I'm riding my bike, and it's an astonishingly difficult thing to do. I think it's harder than just in terms of the amount of work than just about any other sort of audio booth work. And these are sometimes folks doing it in a very linear way, where they'll switch. They're just reading through the book and they'll switch characters on the fly seamlessly.
Sure. That's how I did it. I mean, it's time, man. Yeah. Time is money. Time is money. And I always say, send me the book first. I'll try and suss out. I said, what if I play this guy as an Australian? Oh, you know, it's just, you know, it's all this different stuff. I did all that stuff for Point of Light, Kelly Gay's. And I'm about to do another book in June. And I'm going to play two different characters? Two and a half different characters, let's say. And he got a woman to do all the women's parts. So he's going to have two people in this book. You know, and I'm going to play it like a really sleazy, slimy, badass, biker-ish crack dealer from Kentucky. And then a really straight-laced kind of guy that's you know, clean-cut fella that moved from California to Hawaii to become a camp counselor.
Yeah, I was listening to the audiobook last year on vacation of Dark Tower, Stephen King series, and they switch narrators between books, and both are excellent. Like both actors did a fine job, but that switch is so jarring, especially the like more colorful characters. One of the characters in that book is a sort of New York street hustle kid, and the two takes on it from the two different actors are just, it's jarring, but it's also unenviable.
It's kind of cool.
They're both doing an excellent job, but it's, you know, it's kind of shocking for the reader. It's like recasting a movie. So
it's hard work, man.
Yeah.
It's hard work. It's hard work. I mean, and Kelly I'm so happy that Kelly was thrilled with the job we did with her book. You know, and the guy that produced it was really happy. He's like, he goes, you're a little weird, man. He goes, that you can play a woman's voice and then turn around and be, you know, because, you know, Ryan is a woman herself. So I read the book mostly in a higher pitch, you know, because she's narrating her book, you know, and then of course all the chapters open with Spark with these long dialogues. And I said, did you want to keep him as Spark, or because he's in a new armature, you wanted him to have a completely different sound? She said, no, let's keep him as Spark, because he's so recognizable. You know, I said, I don't know if you wanted me to give him a different voice or whatever. Well, sir, I know you're running out of time. I don't want to keep you too long. So we're going to jump all the way to the very end. Now, I didn't send you something else on purpose, but this is part of what I did send you, and that is there a piece of advice you'd like to give our listeners? Either an aspiring game creator or as an actor, maybe both. If somebody's saying, boy, I'd like to be Frank O'Connor someday, where do they start? What would you say to them about creativity? And if you want to speak to the actors that want to do video game voiceover stuff, you can speak to that.
It's similar advice to anyone trying to get into a profession, specifically for video games. There's a lot of tools that can get you very far along the path that you need to be. There are free to use engines, free license engines. You can develop something in Unreal. If you want to, you'll have to pay a license if you're going to distribute it and make money on it. But there are other engines, Unity and so on. Get one of the big popular ones and start building things. The more stuff that you build, even if it never makes it onto your resume or your reel, the more experience you're going to have solving those problems. And all of the problems that you solve, all of the stuff that you make, no matter how sort of scrappy it is all contributing towards both your expertise and your reel, because you will eventually be able to make something that's cool and be able to demonstrate it and have people play it and see it. And also, especially in video games, you can make something cool on your own, but partner up with folks. There's plenty of folks you can meet online, find an animator or an artist or an audio guy, and collaborate on stuff. And even if you don't make money doing it, you'll get that experience of working with a team and working with real tools.
Right,
so for making video games, there's a lot of really practical things you can do for free or socially that will get you far along the path that you need to be on. But for any creative output, including acting, writing, just be realistic, right? Get opinions, but don't let those opinions crush your dreams. But just assume that your dreams are limited to you creating something that you love. It may not end up being your career. It may not end up being your fortune, but it can end up being the passion of your life, whether you make it in the big time or not. That said, don't give up. A friend of mine gave up a great career in video game journalism to go do something that was impossible. Like, I'm not gonna, if I say what it is, people will guess who I mean. But it's like saying, I'm gonna go be a pop star. And this person left a well-paid, well-regarded role and went off to be, in quotes, a pop star, and just kept at it, kept honing his craft, getting better at what it was that he wanted to do, accepting sort of defeats and hurdles, and figuring them out and getting better every day. And now he's, again, it's stick with the metaphor, he's a famous pop star, and he did it.
Wonderful.
Not everyone's going to do that. So know that, be realistic.
That's right.
Do take feedback, take it seriously, even if you disagree with it. See if there's anything useful in it. We do that all the time. We get plenty of people have plenty of good criticisms of our game. Sometimes they're not phrased as nicely as we'd prefer, but you got to read it and see what truth there is to it, and what you can be doing to make your stuff better. If you make it all the way to the end of your life and you never get published, but you write a beautiful novel, then you've done something worthwhile. So as long as you love it,
right?
Yeah,
you did it.
Do it.
You did it. It's in the trying, that really you feel like you've accomplished something. It's in the continual trying, the continual reaching one hand up to try to pull yourself up when you've fallen, when you stumble, that you feel like you really were able to do something with your life, with your career. And like you said, maybe it's just not for you at first, but there comes a time sometimes where you turn the corner and you're like, wow, that's all it took.
You run a marathon by failing to run a marathon 100 times before that day, right? And you'll get better and stronger each time.
Absolutely. So before I let you go, this is what I didn't send you on purpose, because these are the raw moments. These are what I call lightning round questions.
All right.
If you weren't doing this, Frank O'Connor, what would you be doing?
I would be a pop star or a bouncer. Um,
Wow,
no,
a bouncer.
I'm joking
I can
about
see
that. I
that.
was a bouncer when I was a teenager in Scotland. Really, I was a bottle washer, but they had an alarm that they would ring whenever there was trouble on one of the what we considered the problem floors in this place in Edinburgh, and you'd have to run up and basically just push people out in the street. That was how you dealt with being a bouncer. Get them out of the
And
place.
you'd use the bottle as a knife. I don't know. Wait.
No, I'd leave the bottles on the bar.
Don't make me run you through, lad. Which I love, by the way.
Yes,
Edinburgh was
gorgeous.
beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. Okay. Where do you see Halo or even video gaming in general in the next 5 years?
I think it's become more mainstream. It kind of always was. It's not like the Atari was a niche item that only hardcore gamers used. It was so I just see it becoming more and more just an ordinary part of the culture in the same way that movies and TVs are in a good way. People are doing really cool things with VR just in terms of technology. I think they still have to come up with the perfect game, but they're almost there with there's no wires or, sensors or stuff for the room. So that's
Right.
exciting. And I think there's quality of life things happening in video games above and beyond better graphics and sound and so on, like much faster loading that we take for granted, again, just because it's quality of life stuff. But all of that just is leading to this sort of eventual singularity where video gaming is just perfect. And maybe not in my lifetime, but and only because I ride so badly when I'm riding my bike. But I think that there will be photorealistic VR that is 100% visually convincing, in the next couple of decades. That's just where things are headed. And it doesn't really
Well,
even
and what you had at Outpost was really cool
Right,
for
and-
me. That was
yeah,
wonderful.
and VR is like a mode of entering a game. The games themselves are going to define what the technology needs to be. So I'm putting the cart before the horse a little bit there. VR may be, OLED wallpaper in your bedroom. It may not be a helmet, but immersive
Right,
experience.
right,
It's a
right.
video game. And that's another thing that I think is going to be in the next couple of decades is display technology is going to be crazy. It's going to be extremely efficient, and extremely high fidelity. And I'm
Right.
looking forward to my holodeck.
Wait, yeah, right, exactly. Dude, if you guys at 343 could just make the Star Trek transporter, I'd be really
Yeah,
happy.
well,
So I never have to get on an
We
airplane
could
again.
probably do the transporter accidents for you pretty easily.
But I, as Spark, apparently I can transport people, huh?
Safely.
And the very final question, sir, is where do you see yourself, Frank O'Connor, in the next 5 years? What will you be doing?
In the next 5 years, I will be trying to do better at what I'm doing right now. If you'd given me 20, I could have told you Hawaii if I'm allowed to play my cards right, because that is my favorite other place to be. But yeah,
I love it there, man.
see myself.
I love it there.
Oh yeah,
Which island?
Just floating around with turtles. Maui is my favorite island now, but I like them all.
Yeah.
Even some of the I've never been to Lanai, which is like it's
nor have I.
basically 2 Four Seasons, is what I understand.
I still haven't been to Kauai either.
Kauai is beautiful.
So I hear.
Stunning. Like you could fling your camera down the hill and take 50 award-winning photographs.
Isn't
as
that
it
something?
bounces.
Isn't that? I really like the Big Island too because it's so
Big
diverse.
Island's beautiful. Yep. You've got. I mean, the volcanoes are the one thing that you have there that you don't have anywhere else. Active volcanoes, that is. But yeah, and on that bombshell, Tim.
Yeah, right. We'll cut it in post. We'll cut that out in post.
I can live with it. You can.
Frank, thank you so much for being on the show, man. This is going to be great. I'm sure everybody's going to love hearing, your wisdom and what's going on with 343 and, how you came to jump into the ship. Yeah, really, who brought you on? Was it one of the original primary guys? Was it Marty or
No, I interviewed with a bunch of people, including Marty, actually. But Pete Parsons was the the guy at the time. He's still there. He's CEO at Bungie.
Oh, no kidding. Okay.
But yeah, but there were loads of people interviewed me because they all had to approve of my sense of humor.
which is just lovely. It's a lovely sense of humor.
It's delightful.
All right, brother. Well, you take care. Thank you again. I hope to see you again soon. Hopefully this pandemic will be over and we'll be able to be at an event or some silly thing together.
Likewise. Stay safe.
All right, brother. You take care. And good luck with the series.
Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Ah, doesn't that make you want to don your Spartan wear and obliterate a few grunts? I'm sure it does.
It takes me back, man. It takes me back. Ladies and gentlemen, that was Mr. Frank O'Connor from 343 Industries, the fine folks who continue to guide the Halo franchise into, well, worlds unknown, and now a TV show on Paramount+. I just wanted to say thank you to 343 Industries for loaning me Frank for a few minutes, and of course, thank you, Frank. It's always good catching up with you, brother. Well, on our next show, we're going back to the advertising agencies, this time with a producer. Thought we should hear from them too, because they're pretty much the people that pull everything together. They pull together the creatives, the studios, the cameramen, the grips. I mean, they pretty much pull everybody together for every production that we see and hear. And this guy is hilarious, so you're gonna love him. So until next time,
Save his head, dispose of the rest.
well, wait, that's not what I wanted to say. Remember to find your flow. Take care, everyone. Ta-ta.